The morning began as usual. Allison Parker put the coffee pot on and opened the curtains, letting the spring light into the apartment. Outside the window, the city of Portland was gradually waking up. People were rushing to work, school children were gathering for classes, and cafes were opening their doors. Allison stretched, glancing at her watch. There was exactly 1 hour left until the planning meeting. At 32, she had already earned a reputation as one of the best social workers in the county. Her colleagues respected her for her professionalism and ability to find an approach to even the most difficult clients, and her superiors valued her for her nearly 100% success rate. Allison specialized in working with teenagers and families in crisis situations. Where others gave up, she always saw opportunities. Today, she had a doctor's appointment on her calendar. It was a routine checkup. Allison took her health as seriously as she did her work. But first, she had to go to the office, attend a planning meeting, and write 12 pages of reports. The Multnomah County Social Services Office was located in a typical glass and concrete administrative building. Despite attempts to make the interior more welcoming with plants and bright posters, the place still felt institutional and cold. "Allison, have you seen the new case?" Samantha Reeves, her colleague and best friend, called out to her as soon as Allison crossed the threshold of the shared office. Samantha worked as a staff psychologist and often consulted with Allison's clients. At 29, she looked younger than her age. Her chestnut hair was always pulled back in a casual bun. She wore simple clothes and minimal makeup. Students often mistook her for one of them. "What's the new case?" Grant didn't say anything. Allison put her bag on the table and turned on her computer. "The Carsons, a single mother with an addiction, a teenage daughter with aggressive behavior. Grant passed it on to you because, and I quote, 'Only Parker can untangle this mess.'" Allison sighed. Michael Grant, their supervisor, had a habit of assigning the most difficult cases to her, even when her workload was already overwhelming. On the one hand, it was a recognition of her professionalism. On the other, it sometimes felt like he was deliberately testing her to see when she would break. "I'll look at it after the planning meeting. By the way, I need to ask for a couple of hours off today. I have a scheduled doctor's appointment." "Health problems?" Samantha's voice sounded genuinely concerned. "No, just preventive care. You know how important it is to take care of your health, especially in our profession." The planning meeting went as usual. Discussion of current cases, distribution of new cases, progress reports. Michael Grant, as always, was focused and demanding. At 45, he looked impeccable. Business suit, perfectly styled hair with gray at the temples, clear speech. A former prosecutor, he brought the rigor and methodical approach of the judicial system to social services. "Allison, I would like you to take special control of the Carson case," he said, as the meeting was coming to an end. "There are concerns that the situation could spiral out of control. The girl has already had problems with the law, and her mother is unable to cope." "I'll look into the case today," Allison replied, trying not to show her irritation at yet another difficult task. After the planning meeting, she immersed herself in studying the new case. Rachel Carson, 36 years old, a single mother, works as a waitress in 2 establishments at the same time. History of opioid analgesic dependence following a back injury 3 years ago. Several attempts at rehabilitation, unstable remission. Kira Carson, 15 years old, problems with school attendance, 2 police citations for petty hooliganism, and 1 for participating in a fight. Father unknown, blank space on birth certificate. Time passed, and soon Allison had to put her paperwork aside. It was time to go to the clinic. Having made an appointment with a therapist a month ago due to constant fatigue and frequent colds, she didn't expect anything serious, just work overload and stress. However, things did not go according to plan. After a standard examination, Dr. Fisher, an elderly therapist who had been treating Allison for several years, referred her for additional tests. 3 days later, she was sitting in the office of Dr. Jason Mitchell, a geneticist she had never met before. "Ms. Parker, your test results show some abnormalities. began Mitchell, a 40-year-old man with an attentive gaze behind his glasses. "We performed a chromosome analysis, and it revealed mosaicism on the 21st chromosome." "What does that mean?" Allison felt a lump rising in her throat. "You have a rare form of mosaic Down syndrome. This means that not all of your cells have the trisomy characteristic of Down syndrome, an extra copy of the 21st chromosome. Some of your cells are genetically normal, and some are not. Therefore, the symptoms are much milder, and it is usually impossible to diagnose this form in childhood." Allison listened as if from the outside. Down syndrome? Her? It seemed absurd. She had successfully graduated from college, had a master's degree in social work, had built a career, and led an independent life. "But that's impossible." Her voice sounded weak even to herself. "I would have known. Someone would have noticed earlier. As I said, it's a mosaic form. Physical signs may be minimal or absent altogether. Your frequent infections, certain facial features, minor cognitive characteristics that you may not even have noticed. All of this comes together to form a complete picture only with genetic analysis." "What does that mean for me now?" "From a practical standpoint, not as much as you might think. You have lived for 32 years without knowing about the diagnosis, which proves that you can lead a full life. However, there are certain medical risks that we need to discuss. It would also be helpful to consult with a psychologist. Such a diagnosis can cause a strong emotional response." Allison could hardly concentrate on the rest of the conversation. Thoughts swirled in her head, jumping from one to another. She remembered her school years, the difficulties with math, which she compensated for with hard work, the endless colds and ear infections of her childhood, comments about her unique face, which she always attributed to normal teenage cruelty. After leaving the clinic, she didn't go home. Her feet carried her to a nearby park. Allison sat on a bench, watching the children play, trying to comprehend her new reality. Who was she now? Had anything really changed except for the entry in her medical record? The phone in her pocket vibrated. Samantha. Allison didn't answer. She wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Then a message came from Grant. "I'm waiting for the report on the Carsons by morning." Work didn't wait, even when the world was turned upside down. That evening, returning to her empty apartment, Allison opened her laptop and immersed herself in studying mosaic Down syndrome. The facts were both frightening and encouraging. People with this diagnosis could indeed lead normal lives. Many, like her, only learned about their condition as adults, or never at all. But there were risks: heart disease, hearing problems, early dementia. A knock at the door interrupted her research. Samantha stood on the doorstep with a bag of takeout and a bottle of wine. "You weren't answering your phone." "I was worried," she said, stepping into the apartment. "How did the appointment go?" Allison hesitated. Tell her? Hide it? What would change if people knew? "It's complicated," she finally said. "I got some unexpected news about my health." "Is it serious?" Samantha's eyes filled with concern. "It's not life-threatening, if that's what you're worried about." Allison tried to smile, but it didn't work. "I need time to process everything before I can talk about it." Samantha nodded understandingly, not pressing for details. She began unpacking the food, talking about work, office gossip, anything that might distract Allison from her heavy thoughts. And it worked, at least for a while. "By the way," Samantha said casually, "do you know anything about Daniel Hawk?" "The detective?" "A little. We crossed paths on the Martinez case last year. Serious, professional. Why? He'll be working with us on the Carson case. Juvenile Services is interested in the girl. It looks like there are suspicions of more serious offenses than petty hooliganism." Allison frowned. Police involvement always complicated the work of social services. Often their methods and goals did not coincide. "Does Grant know?" "Of course. He insisted that you take the case. He said that only you could find common ground with both Hawk and the family." Allison suppressed a sigh. Another headache when she already had enough problems. But perhaps immersing herself in work was exactly what she needed right now. A way to stop thinking constantly about the diagnosis and what it meant for her life. "I'm meeting with Rachel and Kira tomorrow," she said. "First impressions are important." "Be careful with them," Samantha said unexpectedly seriously. "I looked at the previous reports. Kira isn't just a difficult teenager. There are signs of antisocial personality disorder." "At 15? Isn't that too early for such a diagnosis?" "I'm just saying it's not that simple. And Grant." Samantha paused. "What about Grant?" "He was very insistent that you handle the case, and he reacted strangely when I asked why. He said something like, 'Parker has a personal interest in the success of this case.'" Allison raised her eyebrows in surprise. "A personal interest? I don't even know these people." "Exactly. I thought it was strange." The conversation moved on to other topics, but Samantha's words lingered in Allison's mind. The morning seemed too bright. The sun's rays streaming through the blinds were a relentless reminder that a new day had dawned. Allison lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. It had been 5 days since the diagnosis. Down syndrome. The words still sounded unreal. Her gaze fell on the bedside table, where there were printouts of articles about mosaic syndrome and a list of recommended specialists to visit. Dr. Mitchell had been insistent: a cardiologist, an endocrinologist, an otolaryngologist, a neurologist. An entire army of doctors who would now become part of her life. Her phone vibrated, a reminder of her meeting with the Carsons. Work, responsibility, routine, which now seemed like a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. On the way to the office, Allison caught herself studying her reflection in the rearview mirror for the first time. The minor features of her face, which she had previously considered individual traits, now took on new meaning. Her slightly slanted eyes, the shape of her ears. How could she not have noticed? How could others not have noticed? Samantha was already waiting for her in the office with coffee. "You look better," she said, handing her a cup. "Ready to meet the Carsons?" "As ready as you can be for something like this," Allison tried to smile. "Have you found out anything else about the case?" "Nothing significant. Grant is silent, and Hawk hasn't contacted us yet." In a way, that was a relief. Fewer things to worry about. Allison opened the case file, reviewing the records one last time before the meeting. There wasn't much information. An address, a history of social service referrals, school psychologist reports on Kira. "Are you planning to tell Grant?" Samantha asked suddenly, lowering her voice. Allison knew what she was talking about. "About the diagnosis? I don't know. I'm not legally obligated to. Besides, it doesn't change anything. I'm still the same person." "Of course you're the same person," Samantha said, putting her hand on her shoulder. "But Grant can be unpredictable." Allison couldn't deny that. Behind the facade of the perfect boss, Michael Grant hid a complex personality. He valued results above all else, and if he decided that the diagnosis could affect her work, her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Grant himself stood in the doorway, impeccable as always, with a folder of documents in his hands. "Parker, are you ready for the Carsons?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, the meeting is scheduled for 10. "Good. After the meeting, I'll see you in my office. We need to talk." He had already turned to leave, but paused. "Are you okay? You look tired." "I'm fine, just feeling a little under the weather." Grant nodded and left. Samantha raised an eyebrow meaningfully. "Maybe he wants to talk about that personal interest?" "Possibly," Allison replied, gathering her papers. "I'll find out after the meeting." The Carsons' house was located in a less than desirable neighborhood. The 2-story townhouse, long in need of repair, stood out among the neighboring buildings with its peeling paint and neglected front yard. Allison knocked on the door and prepared for her first meeting with her clients. The door was opened by Rachel Carson, a thin woman with tired eyes and premature wrinkles. At 36, she looked 45. "Are you from social services?" she asked without much interest. "Yes, Allison Parker." "We had an appointment." Rachel stepped aside silently, letting Allison into the house. Inside, it was clean but austere. Minimal furniture, no decorations. 3 empty bottles of cheap wine stood on the kitchen table. "Kira's upstairs," Rachel said, noticing Allison's gaze. "I'm not sure she'll want to come down. And yes, I was drinking yesterday. It's not against the law." "I'm not here to judge," Allison replied gently. "I'm here to help." Rachel smiled bitterly. Everyone says that, and then they start demanding the impossible. The conversation was difficult. Rachel was wary, answering in monosyllables. The story unfolded gradually. A back injury at work 3 years ago, severe pain, prescriptions for opioids that became increasingly difficult to obtain, a gradual descent into addiction, loss of employment, financial problems. And Kira, who had gone from being a good student to a troubled teenager in trouble with the law. "She blames me," Rachel said with unexpected sincerity. "And she's right. I let her down." At that moment, Kira appeared on the stairs, a petite girl with dark hair and a distrustful look. She looked at Allison appraisingly. "Another social worker? How are you any different from the others?" "I'm still here," Allison replied calmly, "and I'll stay here until we help resolve your situation." Kira snorted, but came down and sat next to her mother, a small gesture of support that Allison noted to herself. All was not lost in their relationship. The conversation lasted almost an hour. Allison learned about Kira's problems at school, Rachel's unsuccessful attempts to find a stable job, and their perpetual lack of money. She sketched out a plan of action: a rehabilitation program for Rachel, psychological support for Kira, help with finding a job and benefits. As she was saying goodbye, Allison noticed Rachel's strange reaction to the mention of Michael Grant's name. The woman flinched and looked away. "Do you know Mr. Grant?" Allison asked cautiously. "No, of course not," Rachel replied too quickly. "The name just sounded familiar." It was an obvious lie, but Allison didn't press the issue. Just another piece of the growing puzzle. Grant was waiting for her in his office. He was sitting at his desk, studying some documents, and gestured for Allison to sit down. "How did the meeting go?" he asked. "Not easy. Standard case, trauma, opioids, addiction, broken family. But there's potential to work with her. Both mother and daughter understand they need help." Grant nodded, listening intently to her report. When Allison finished, he paused, as if weighing his words. "There's something you need to know about this case," he finally said. "It's special." "In what way?" "The police department suspects that Kira may be connected to a series of thefts and possible drug dealing at the school. Nothing has been proven, but Detective Hawk believes the girl has information that could help the investigation." "And you want me to get that information out of her?" Allison felt indignation rising inside her. "That goes against my professional principles." "No," Grant raised his hand, stopping her. "I want you to do your job. Help the family. But if something important comes up in the process, Hawk needs to know." Allison was silent, thinking about what she had heard. The dual role she was being offered raised serious ethical questions. "Why me?" she asked bluntly. "Samantha said you mentioned some kind of personal interest." Grant sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I knew Reeves wouldn't be able to keep quiet," he said after a pause. "Let's just say you have qualities that make you the ideal candidate for this job. We'll talk about it later, when you get to know the family better." The answer was evasive, and that bothered Allison. She said goodbye and left the office with the feeling that there was more to this than just a simple work assignment. A surprise awaited her in the hallway: Dr. Mitchell, the geneticist who had given her the diagnosis. "Doctor, what are you doing here?" "Miss Parker," he seemed embarrassed. "I have a meeting with Mr. Grant. It's a professional matter." Allison froze. Was it a coincidence? Or did Grant already know about her diagnosis? Returning to her desk, she found Samantha talking to an unfamiliar man. "Here she is," Samantha smiled. "Allison, this is Detective Daniel Hawk." The man turned around. He looked to be about 35, with attentive gray eyes and the bearing of a military man. "Miss Parker at last," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "I've heard a lot about your work." "I hope it's all good, Detective," Allison said, trying to hide her tension behind a professional smile. "Mostly," he said with a slight smile. "Has Grant briefed you yet?" "Partially. As I understand it, you're interested in Kira Carson." "Not just Kira. The entire Carson family is of interest to the investigation, and I would appreciate your cooperation." Allison looked at Hawk intently. Something in his tone made her wary. "My main goal is to help this family, Detective, not to get them arrested." "Sometimes those goals coincide," he said, handing her his business card. "Call me if you notice anything unusual." After Hawk left, Samantha leaned toward her. "What do you think?" "I think we're being used as bait," Allison replied quietly, "and I don't like it." That evening, on her way home, she noticed an unfamiliar car parked across from her house. It was a dark sedan with tinted windows. Was she just being paranoid, or was she really being followed? The next day, Allison woke up with a headache. A vague uneasiness wouldn't leave her. Opening her email, she found a letter from an anonymous sender with an attached file. Contrary to all cybersecurity rules, she opened it. It was her medical record, complete with the latest test results and diagnosis. And a note: some people with special abilities are better off not meddling in other people's business. Allison waited 3 days for the threat to be repeated, but nothing happened. The dark sedan no longer appeared near her house, and no new letters arrived. Only a vague feeling that she was being watched haunted her everywhere she went. Wednesday morning began with a phone call. Dr. Mitchell wanted to meet to discuss the results of additional tests. Allison agreed to meet that evening, deciding it was a good opportunity to find out what connected genetics to Grant. There was unusual excitement in the office. New cases, reports, event plans. Michael Grant seemed to be loading the staff with more work than usual. When Allison entered the common room, the conversations died down. Several colleagues quickly looked away, while others, on the contrary, looked at her with a curiosity she had not noticed before. "What's going on?" she asked Samantha, who was giving her concerned looks. "I don't know how to say this," her friend replied quietly, looking around. "There are rumors." "Rumors?" "About your health. Someone said you have a serious diagnosis." I tried to stop the talk, but Allison felt the room spin before her eyes. Someone had not only found out about her diagnosis, but was deliberately spreading the information. Was it the same person who had sent her the medical report with the threat? "What exactly are they saying?" Her voice sounded hollow. "That you have Down syndrome, that you hid it when you were hired, that Grant might now remove you from certain tasks." Samantha paused. "Is that true? Why didn't you tell me?" "I was going to. I just wasn't ready." "Allison," Samantha took her hand, "it doesn't change anything. You're still the same excellent specialist." "Tell that to Grant," Allison smiled bitterly, "and to the rest of them who are already looking at me askance." All day long, she felt her colleagues' eyes on her. Some expressed silent support, others whispered behind her back. Even the clients seemed to look at her differently. Or was it just paranoia, exacerbated by stress? Towards evening, Grant called her in. He looked irritated, tapping his pen on the table, a sign of extreme dissatisfaction. "I got a call from Hawk," he began without preamble. "The Carsons complained that you asked too many personal questions that were irrelevant to the case." "What?" Allison was genuinely surprised. "I strictly adhered to protocol." "Really?" Grant slid a piece of paper toward her. "Then explain why you asked Rachel about me." "I noticed her reaction to your name. She clearly knows you, even though she denies it." Grant fell silent, his gaze hardening. Parker, your job is to help this family, not dig into the past. Especially now, when there are doubts about your professional competence. You knew, she said, not as a question, but as a statement. You knew about my diagnosis. Mitchell is an old friend of mine, Grant admitted. He consulted with me about the legal aspects, confidentially, of course. But not so confidential that it didn't become office gossip, Allison said, barely containing her anger. Who else knows? That's irrelevant. What matters is whether you can continue to perform your duties, especially given the new circumstances. My condition does not affect the quality of my work. It never has. But it does create certain risks, legal, reputational. Grant leaned forward. It would be wise for you to take some time off while we assess the situation. Are you suspending me? I'm suggesting a break, for your own good, and for the good of the service. As she left the office, Allison felt rage boiling inside her. It wasn't just betrayal, it was an attempt to get rid of her. And just when she was starting to figure out the Carson case, that evening, in a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town, she met with Dr. Mitchell. The geneticist looked guilty, avoiding her gaze. I had no right to disclose your medical information, he began after an awkward silence. But Grant insisted it was a matter of public safety. Public safety? Allison didn't hide her skepticism. How does my health threaten safety? Not your health, your history. Mitchell took a deep breath. Your history. And he told her. 25 years ago, Michael Grant was a young lawyer working with child welfare agencies. Among his cases was one in particular, the removal of a child from a family due to suspected abuse, a child with Down syndrome. The DNA test was a formality, a mandatory procedure before placement in the foster care system. You mean, the test showed that the child had a mosaic form of the syndrome, a very rare case. Mitchell looked at her sympathetically. That child was you, Allison. The world around her froze. Mitchell's words echoed in her head, connecting the scattered pieces of the puzzle. Grant had known about her long before she came to work for social services. Perhaps he was even the reason she ended up there. What about my biological family? She asked quietly. A single mother with an addiction. I don't know the details, but Grant clearly feels guilty about it. He thinks he was too quick to remove you. Allison remembered her adoptive family, loving, caring. They had never hidden the fact that she was adopted, but they didn't know the details themselves. Your mother couldn't take care of you, was all they told her. What do the Carsons have to do with it? She asked, trying to piece together the scattered pieces of the puzzle. Mitchell shook his head. I don't know, but Grant was very insistent that you handle this case, and he was very concerned when I confirmed your diagnosis. As she left the coffee shop, Allison felt her determination grow. Vacation? No. She wouldn't stop until she knew the whole truth. The next morning, she called Daniel Hawk and arranged a meeting. The detective was surprised by her initiative, but agreed to meet her at the police station. The small office smelled of coffee and paper. Hawk looked at her with professional interest. I didn't expect you to contact me yourself, he said, offering her a seat. We have a common interest, the Carson family. Allison decided to get straight to the point. I think we should join forces. Why now? Because Grant has effectively removed me from the case, and because this is connected to something bigger than just a difficult teenager. Hawk looked at her silently, as if assessing her. Then he took a folder out of his desk drawer. Rachel Carson used to be Rachel Donovan. 12 years ago, she worked at a law firm where Grant was a partner, he said, handing Allison a photograph. They were close, very close. In the photo, a young Grant was hugging a laughing woman, a rejuvenated Rachel, with no signs of addiction. We are currently investigating a series of thefts of prescription drugs. There is evidence that Kira is involved in distributing them at school. But more importantly, 2 months ago, Rachel began blackmailing Grant. With what? Information about the past, They share a secret, and it has something to do with you. Allison stared at the photo in shock. Could it really be Rachel? No, impossible. The age didn't match, but there was clearly some connection. I need to talk to Rachel, Allison said firmly. That's why I shared the information. Hawk nodded. But be careful. If Grant finds out, he had already suspended me. It couldn't get any worse. That same day, Allison drove to the Carson's house. No one answered the door, but a neighbor said Rachel should be home from work by 5. Kira usually came home from school later, often staying out late for unknown reasons. Allison waited in her car, watching the house. At 5:30, Rachel appeared, looking even more exhausted than when they last met. She noticed Allison and looked around nervously before approaching. "You shouldn't be here," she said, instead of greeting her. "Grant said he would assign another social worker. I need to ask you some questions, about Grant, about your past." Rachel turned pale. "I can't. Not here. We could be watched." "Where then?" "At Laurelhurst Park in an hour, by the Japanese garden." Rachel hurried into the house, looking around again. Allison got into her car, trying to collect her thoughts. Something told her that today she would finally learn the truth. The park was almost empty. It was a weekday evening. There were a few joggers, dog walkers, and a couple of tourists by the Japanese garden. Allison waited for almost 20 minutes before she noticed Rachel approaching. The woman looked frightened, constantly looking around. "We need to be quick," she said, sitting down on a bench. "Grant mustn't find out about our conversation." "Why are you afraid of him?" "Because he can take Kira away, like he took her sister away." "Her sister?" Allison felt her heart skip a beat. "Not her biological sister," Rachel clarified. "Her adoptive sister. A little girl I wanted to adopt 16 years ago. Grant was working for Child Protective Services at the time. He talked me out of it. He said that with my past, I didn't stand a chance. And then he used that as leverage when I got pregnant with Kira." "Kira is Grant's daughter?" Allison was shocked. "Yes, but he never acknowledged her. He paid me to keep quiet and leave. I was stupid to agree to those terms. And then came the trauma, the pills, the addiction. When the money ran out, I tried to contact him, but he threatened to take away my parental rights." "But now you're blackmailing him?" Rachel smiled bitterly. "I'm not blackmailing him. I'm just reminding him of his responsibilities as a father. And that story about the foster girl, something wasn't right there. He clearly violated procedures to deny me." "What happened to that girl?" "I don't know. She was adopted by other people. Grant said it would be better for everyone." Allison stared at the water in the pond, trying to make sense of what she had heard. Could she have been that girl? The dates matched. And if so, that meant Kira was... "I've gathered the documents," Rachel continued. "I want to get Grant to recognize Kira and give us real help. Not handouts, but real support. To do that, I need to meet with him alone, tomorrow, at his house." "That's dangerous." Allison felt a sudden chill. "You shouldn't..." "I have no choice. Kira is in serious trouble. These drug thefts, I'm afraid she'll be arrested. Grant has to help, she's his daughter." Rachel looked determined, but fear was evident in her eyes. Allison wanted to suggest another solution, but at that moment Rachel's phone rang. Glancing at the screen, the woman turned pale. "I have to go, right away." "Who is it?" "It doesn't matter. Just don't follow me, for your own safety." Rachel quickly got up and almost ran down the park path. Allison remained seated, shaken by the information that had come to light. If Kira was Grant's daughter, if he was afraid of being exposed, if Rachel was threatening to reveal not only this fact, but also some violations in the adoption procedure, Allison's phone vibrated. A message from Samantha. "Where are you? I need to talk to you urgently about Grant and Mitchell. There's something you need to know." Allison replied, arranging to meet the next morning. She had a sleepless night ahead of her. There was too much information to process. and a heavy, oppressive feeling wouldn't leave her. Something was bound to happen. Something irreparable. The phone rang at 6 in the morning. Exhausted from a sleepless night, Allison didn't immediately understand what was going on. The display lit up with Daniel Hawk's name. "Parker, you need to come to the Carson's house immediately." The detective's voice sounded tense. "What happened?" Her sleep vanished instantly. "Rachel Carson is dead. She was killed last night." Allison felt the ground slip away from under her feet. Rachel. Dead. Impossible. They had spoken just a few hours ago. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." Her voice sounded like a stranger's. The Carson neighborhood was cordoned off by police. Neighbors crowded behind the yellow tape, whispering and filming the scene on their phones. Some were crying, others were simply watching the investigation team at work with curiosity. Hawk was waiting for her at the police cordon. "Thanks for coming so quickly," he said, letting Allison inside the perimeter. "We need to talk before Grant arrives." "Grant? What does he have to do with this?" "As the head of social services, he needs to be notified, especially since the victim is your ward." Hawk looked at her intently. "Or are there other reasons?" Allison didn't answer. They approached the Carson's house, where work was now in full swing. Forensic scientists, photographers, uniformed officers. "What happened?" she asked, trying not to look toward the living room, where, judging by the concentration of personnel, the body was located. "A neighbor called the police around 5 in the morning. She heard screams, then silence. When the patrol officers arrived, the door was ajar. Rachel was found in the living room. Multiple stab wounds," Hawk said calmly, professionally, but the tension was evident in his eyes. "Preliminary time of death is between midnight and 2 in the morning." "What about Kira?" Allison was suddenly overcome with anxiety. "Where is Rachel's daughter?" "We don't know. Her things are here, her bed is made. According to the neighbors, she may not have been home last night." Allison tried to process what she had heard. Rachel was murdered. Kira was missing. All this after yesterday's conversation about Grant. "I need to tell you something," she lowered her voice, "about yesterday's meeting with Rachel." They moved aside to the police car, where Allison recounted the details of yesterday's conversation. That Kira was Grant's daughter. That Rachel had been gathering documents to blackmail him. About the planned meeting with Grant. Hawk listened without interrupting, only occasionally making notes in his notebook. "That changes things," he finally said, "and makes Grant the prime suspect." "Do you think he could—" Allison couldn't finish the sentence. "He had a motive. A strong motive." Hawk rubbed his chin. "We need to find Kira. If she saw or knows anything." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up. Michael Grant. He looked composed and calm as always, only the deep shadows under his eyes betrayed a sleepless night. Noticing Allison, he froze for a moment, then walked decisively toward them. "Hawk," he nodded to the detective. "Parker, what are you doing here? You're on vacation." "I invited Miss Parker as a witness," Hawk replied before Allison could open her mouth. "She was the last person to see the victim alive." Grant shifted his gaze from Hawk to Allison. "Did you meet with Rachel yesterday, after I took you off the case?" "I had questions," Allison replied firmly. "About you. About Kira." Grant's face hardened. "Hawk, I need to talk to Miss Parker alone." "I'm afraid that's not possible," the detective said, stepping between them. "We were just about to go to the station for her official statement." The tension between the men was almost palpable. Finally, Grant backed down. "All right, but I want to be present during the interview, as a social services representative." "Of course," Hawk nodded with professional courtesy. "After we talk to you as a witness. Where were you last night, Mr. Grant?" Grant's face twitched. "Are you suspecting me of something?" "Standard procedure. We interview everyone who was connected to the victim." Allison spent several hours at the police station, describing in detail her interactions with Rachel and Kira, especially their last conversation. Hawk asked questions calmly and methodically, sometimes returning to the same details, clarifying the time, wording, reactions. Did she say that Grant was Kira's father and that he had forced her to keep quiet about it? Yes. And that now that Kira was in trouble, she had decided to pressure him, to force him to help. And did she mention that she was going to meet him at his house? Yes, last night. Hawk made a note. Grant claims he was home alone all evening. No one can confirm that. Do you think Rachel went to see him? We're checking her phone, her geolocation. But if she really was at Grant's, the door opened and a female officer entered the room. Detective, we just got a call. Kira Carson was found in Laurelhurst Park. She's in shock but physically unharmed. Bring her in. Hawk turned to Allison. Would you mind being present for the interview? It will be easier for her with someone she knows. Kira was brought in 20 minutes later. The 15-year-old girl looked lost and frightened. When she saw Allison, she relaxed a little. Kira, you're safe, Allison said softly as she approached her. Detective Hawk wants to ask you a few questions. I'll be here the whole time. Kira nodded, her gaze unfocused, her hands trembling slightly, signs of shock. Kira, I'm very sorry about your mother, Hawk began when they sat down. Can you tell me where you were last night? At a friend's house. The girl's voice sounded mechanical. At Jason's. We watched movies. Then I fell asleep. In the morning, I saw missed calls from my mom, lots of them. Her voice broke. What time did you leave the house? Around 8 in the evening. Mom said she had to meet someone important. She said that after that, everything would change for the better. Hawk and Allison exchanged glances. Grant. Did she say who she was going to meet? Kira shook her head. No, but she's been strange the last few days, nervous. She kept checking some documents and looking at old photos. Does the name Michael Grant mean anything to you? Kira flinched. Mom's boss at the law firm? She sometimes mentioned him when she wasn't herself, after the pills. What did she say? That he ruined everything, that he was supposed to help us, but instead he abandoned us. Kira frowned, trying to remember. And something about a sister. I always thought it was nonsense. I don't have a sister. Allison felt a lump rise in her throat. A sister. The same girl Rachel wanted to adopt? Herself? Further questioning yielded no significant information. Kira didn't know the details of her mother's relationship with Grant, hadn't seen the documents she was collecting. She was released into the custody of her aunt, who had come from a neighboring state. When they were alone, Hawk looked pensive. Everything points to Grant. Motive, opportunity, no alibi. But there's no direct evidence, Allison pointed out. And those documents Rachel mentioned. We searched the house, nothing. If the documents existed, the killer took them. What about Rachel's phone? The last call in the park, after which she hurried away. Rachel received a message, not a call, from an unknown number. The text, waiting for you today at 10. We'll discuss everything. MG. Michael Grant? Probably. But the phone the message was sent from was found near the Carson's house. A disposable phone, no fingerprints. Allison thought for a moment. What if Grant lured her home, killed her, and planted the phone to cover his tracks? That's the working theory. We've requested a search warrant for his home and office, and we're checking the surveillance cameras along the route between his house and the Carson's house. As she left the station, Allison saw Samantha. Her friend looked worried. I've been calling you all morning, she said, hugging Allison. I heard about Rachel. That's terrible. I couldn't answer. I was giving my statement. Allison looked closely at her friend. You wanted to tell me something important about Grant and Mitchell. What exactly? Samantha looked around. Not here. Let's go. In a small cafe across from the station, Samantha spoke quietly, nervously twirling her coffee cup. I overheard their conversation. Grant was furious that Mitchell told you about your past. He threatened him. Threatened him with what? I'm not sure. But Mitchell looked scared. He said something like, "She has a right to know the truth. About herself. About Rachel. About the real reason you transferred Kira to our department." Allison froze. The real reason? Yes. He said he was tired of covering for you. Something doesn't add up in this story, Ellie. If Grant is Kira's father, why was he so eager for you to work on this case? It was a good question. One of many that Allison didn't yet know the answer to. When she returned home, she found the door ajar. Carefully entering, she saw signs of a search. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered. Someone had been looking for something in her apartment, and apparently hadn't found it. The phone rang. It was Hawk's number. "Parker, I have news." The cameras near Grant's house show Rachel entering his home at around 10 p.m., but there is no record of her leaving. Pause. "And we have something interesting from an ATM camera 3 blocks from the Carson's house. The recording was made at 1:15 a.m. It shows Grant getting out of his car with a package in his hands. Are you going to arrest him? Already. He denies everything, claims Rachel left him around 11 p.m. But the cameras don't show that." Hawk paused. "There's something else. Mitchell came in with a voluntary statement. Something related to your past and the adoption case. He asked for you to be present." Allison looked at the ransacked apartment, and inside her grew the realization that all these years her life had been built on a lie. And now, as the truth began to come out, someone was willing to kill to keep the secret. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said, already knowing that the upcoming conversation would change everything. The police station buzzed like an agitated beehive. The arrest of the head of social services on suspicion of murder was a sensation in Little Portland. Journalists besieged the building, demanding comments, while police officers worked overtime, eager to close the case as soon as possible. In the small interrogation room, Allison waited to meet with Mitchell. The doctor looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept for several days. "I should have told you earlier," he began, avoiding her gaze. "Before things got this far." Hawk sat in the corner, watching them both closely. "Tell me what?" Allison asked. "About who you really are." Mitchell sighed deeply. "You're not just a child that Grant took from a dysfunctional family. You're Rachel Carson's daughter." The silence in the room became palpable. Allison looked at Mitchell, trying to comprehend his words. "But that's impossible," she finally said. "Rachel talked about the girl she wanted to adopt." She was lying. Or more accurately, she believed the lie that Grant had instilled in her. Mitchell looked genuinely guilty. 25 years ago, Rachel was a 17-year-old girl from a dysfunctional family. She got pregnant by her college professor, Michael Grant. He was afraid of scandal and persuaded her to give up the baby immediately after giving birth. "So Allison couldn't say it out loud. "You are the biological daughter of Michael Grant and Rachel Carson, and Kira's half-sister." Mitchell took an old photograph out of the folder. "Here's the proof." In the photo, a young Rachel was holding a newborn baby in her arms. On the back was a date and 2 letters, EK. "Grant forged the documents," Mitchell continued. "He made it look like Rachel gave you up because of your diagnosis. He used mosaic syndrome as an excuse to convince her that the child would be taken away anyway, and he convinced her that another family had adopted you." Hawk leaned forward. "When did you find out about this, doctor?" "A week ago. Grant was in a panic. Rachel found some old photos and started asking questions, and then somehow she discovered that Allison worked in his department. That's why he insisted I take the Carson case," Allison said, as if talking to herself. "He wanted to control the situation." Hawk nodded. "The motive gets even stronger. Double blackmail, admitting paternity of Kira and revealing the truth about you. It could have destroyed his career." Mitchell looked uncertain. "There's something else. Grant asked me to confirm the relationship with a DNA test, discreetly. I took samples from Allison under the pretext of additional research on the syndrome. And the results? Allison asked tensely. Positive. You really are Grant and Rachel's daughter, and Kira's half-sister. Allison closed her eyes, trying to control her emotions. Her whole image of herself and her past was crumbling before her eyes. Meanwhile, the investigation was gaining momentum. Grant refused to testify without a lawyer. Kira was under the supervision of psychologists. Samantha was helping her colleagues sort through the suspended manager's files. That evening, Hawk called Allison. We need to meet urgently. New information has come to light. A small investigation team had gathered in his office. On the table were printouts of the results of the search of Grant's house. We found a knife, presumably the murder weapon, Hawk said. There are traces of Rachel's blood on the blade. But here's the strange thing. There are no prints from Grant on the handle. Instead, there are others. Whose? Samantha Reeves. Ellison felt a chill inside. That's impossible. Samantha couldn't have done it. She has no alibi for the night of the murder, and she has a motive. What is it? Jealousy and protecting you. Hawk showed her printouts of email correspondence. Samantha has been in love with you for a long time. When she found out about your diagnosis and how Grant treated you, she vowed to protect you at all costs. Allison couldn't believe it. Samantha, her best friend, the person closest to her. She was watching you in the park when you met with Rachel, Hawk continued. She overheard the conversation. Then she sent Rachel a message pretending to be Grant, luring her into a trap. But the security footage shows Grant. Rachel did go to Grant's house. They talked. He denied everything. And she left around 11, through the back door, avoiding the cameras. Grant lied to us about it because he panicked. And later, he did drive to the Carson's house to check if everything was okay after a series of angry messages from Rachel. But by that time, she was already dead. Allison tried to make sense of the new information. Do you think Samantha killed Rachel to protect me? And to eliminate a rival? Hawk nodded. Rachel was your biological mother. If the truth came out, you might have wanted to get closer to her and Kira. But how do you explain the knife at Grant's house? It was planted. Samantha had access to his house. She delivered documents for him to sign when he worked from home. The plan to arrest Samantha was developed overnight. She was called and asked to come to the station for additional testimony in Grant's case. She arrived in the morning, calm and collected. Samantha Reeves, Hawk began when she sat down across from him. You are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Rachel Carson. Her face showed no surprise. Only her eyes darted to Allison, who was sitting in the corner of the room. You know why I did it, she said quietly. She would have ruined everything, your career, your life. She was my mother, Allison's voice trembled. She was a selfish drug addict who abandoned you at birth, Samantha suddenly snapped. And now, 25 years later, she decided to use you to blackmail Grant. So you overheard our conversation in the park? Yes, and I realized I had to act immediately. Samantha looked almost calm, as if she had resigned herself to her fate. I wrote to her on Grant's behalf and arranged a meeting at her house. She let me in, unsuspecting. She thought I had come to discuss your condition after the diagnosis. And you killed her. I protected you. Samantha's eyes flashed with fanatical fire. From the truth that would have destroyed your life. From a woman who would use you and throw you away again. From Grant, who had manipulated all of us for years. Hawk interrupted her monologue by reading her rights. As Samantha was being led away, she turned around one last time. I loved you, Allison. I always loved you. And I did everything for you. In the weeks that followed, life changed at a dizzying pace. Grant was released from custody, but suspended from duty pending an internal investigation. Kira, upon learning the truth about her parents and that Allison was her half-sister, kept her distance, not knowing how to react to the news. Allison temporarily took over as head of social services. Every day she struggled with conflicting emotions: grief for a mother she never knew, anger at a father who had lied to her all her life, pain from the betrayal of her best friend. A month after Samantha's arrest, Allison finally decided to take an important step. She called Kira and invited her to lunch. "I don't know if we'll ever be a real family," she said to the teenager, who was nervously fiddling with her napkin. "But I want you to know that you're not alone. You have me." Kira looked up, her eyes so similar to their father's. "Do you think we can start over?" "Not over," Allison shook her head, "but from this moment on, step by step." As they left the restaurant, it began to rain. Allison opened her umbrella, and Kira, after a moment's hesitation, stepped under it. It was a small gesture, but to Allison, it meant more than all the words in the world. They had a long road ahead of them: Samantha's trial, the proceedings with Grant, therapy for both of them. But at that moment, walking alongside her sister in the rain, Allison felt for the first time in a long time that she was not alone. That the truth, no matter how painful, was better than the most sophisticated lie. And that something new could be built from the fragments of a ruined life. Something different from before, but perhaps more real.